Over the last week, we've exposed you, regrettably, to some really bad arguments for why DC does not deserve to be a state, why its inhabitants don't deserve to have political representation. Here is one of the worst arguments, and then an immediate response that I absolutely love.
Yes, Wyoming is smaller than Washington by population, but it has 3 times as many workers in mining, logging, and construction, and 10 times as many workers in manufacturing. In other words, Wyoming is a well-rounded, working-class state.
One Senate Republican said that DC wouldn't be a, quote, well-rounded, working-class state. I had no idea there were so many syllables in the word white.
That's good. That's pretty good. I like that. Tom Cotton thought he was very clever.
Brett. I hadn't seen that.
Isn't that good? Mondaire Jones, new representative. That is very good.
That's all he could mean.
That's what he means.
Wyoming has no jobs in what? Like Wyoming doesn't have as many workers as DC does. It doesn't contribute as much. Like, what am I gonna say? It's so easy to say stuff back to that. I love when they think they have a gotcha point. Here's my point back. Like,
does he actually think that's a gotcha?
I would just say, dear Tom Cotton, if I were to add up all the workers in Wyoming, they would not equal all the workers in DC. But I still think Wyoming should be a state.
Like, what? That's very fair of you. Yeah, they have a lot of people who log. Okay, well then I guess Canada's 20 times better than us. They cut down trees all the time up there. It's such a stupid, asinine argument.
You just chose what jobs you like based on the place you like. You can't do that. That's not like a system of belief in law. Like, pick the industry well-rounded. Pick the industry in DC. Like, we have people who have, part-time jobs. We have people who are in the service industry. Does that not matter to him?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It's just the votes that he wants. That is such a bad non-argument. He hasn't made any real argument, and all he is doing is that political theater thing, where you're just like, guys, we can all look around and agree that was the dumbest set of words that all add up to a non-point that we can see through, and not just because it's pasty.
Yeah, that's true. I think the issue, I don't have a great read on how genuinely intelligent Tom Cotton is, so maybe he is impressed by that argument. I would argue I don't think he is, but he knows that it doesn't have to be impressive, and that is the result of the fact that everybody who votes for him doesn't care about any of this. They have not reached the conclusion that DC should not be a state based on an analysis of how many people work in manufacturing. Like, that's not. They just don't want it to be a state. They don't care what argument he makes. They just want him to vote to not make it a state. And technically he has to say something. So he is filling the air with noise, and then he gives them what they want. He could say virtually anything, and the donors who want the GOP to be in charge would still like it. The base would still like it. So it can be a pathetic argument. What's the difference? What is Fox News, like, is Tucker Carlson gonna be like, I really don't want DC to be a state either, but I wish that we would come equipped with better arguments. Nobody's gonna do that. So what's the point? Why be better? Why would we talk about this with Charlie Kirk all the time? His tweets are absolute dog crap. Why would they be better? He gets 20,000 retweets on the stupidest thoughts a human has ever had. They will be as dumb and pathetic as they can be and still succeed. And on the right, that bar is buried at the center of the earth.
It's very yeah, I agree with all that. And also his argument is very obviously racist, but it doesn't need to be racist to be un-American. Like, sure. I don't need to call it racist to say that what he just said is that certain Americans are worth more in terms of democracy than other Americans. He just said,
that's what he said.
I've decided the people of a person in Wyoming is more valuable than a person in DC. And not even more valuable. A person in Wyoming is more of an American to him. And their votes should be worth more. They should have more representation than an American living in DC. That is psychotic. That is un-American. and he should suffer the consequences from that. But instead, he's going to say, well, at least if I make a racist argument, I've now set up this idea that if someone points it out as racist, now I get to say, why you keep calling me racist? That's like someone being like, someone who keeps crashing their car into the wall, getting angry when people say you should stop crashing your car into the wall. Like it's still a problem, and I'm right.
I agree with what you're saying. I wanted to give Representative Jones a little bit more time to make his point, which he did. And you're talking about Republicans freaking out when you call them racist. Well, they're going to demonstrate that right here.
I have had enough of my colleagues' racist insinuations that somehow the people of Washington, D.C. are incapable or even unworthy of our democracy. One of my House Republican colleagues said that D.C. shouldn't be a state because the district doesn't have a landfill. My goodness, with all the racist trash my colleagues have brought to this debate, I can see why they're worried about having a place to put it. The truth is, there is no good faith argument for disenfranchising over 700,000 people, Mr. Speaker, most of whom are people of color. Of color. These desperate objections are about fear. Fear that in D.C. their white supremacist politics will no longer play. Fear that soon enough white supremacist politics won't work anywhere in America. Fear that if they don't rig our democracy, they will not win. Today, Democrats are standing up for a multiracial democracy, to democratize all 51 states in this country. I yield back.
So in the middle there, the Republicans had objections, they stopped, there was a huge back and forth, and then he was thankfully allowed to continue after a bunch of people on the Republican side trying to shout over him. But he made great points there. He's totally right about what their actual opposition is about. It's not that they genuinely believe no taxation without representation if you chop down trees for a living. They just don't want more Democratic senators, and they don't want to have to compete for the vote of people that live in DC.
Yeah, and he's just it's something feels intuitively wrong about one side getting more votes from human beings and from citizens in America and losing. Like that's weird, right? We have, if you were worried about they want to be this embattled group. And maybe because they are the minority, like they don't get as many votes on the right. And that has been the trick. America has made these awesome promises. And I love those promises. America promised to be a country that runs by the will of the majority without jeopardizing the rights of the minority. That's what the Bill of Rights is for. That's a distinctly progressive worldview of America. It made those great promises that this is a place where you can come and pursue your dreams and reach for the stars and grab out and get them.
Yeah,
but it didn't always follow through on those promises. It doesn't follow through. At the beginning, when it said that, it was like, unless you're black or a woman, like that was it. And it wasn't until the Civil War and 1920 when each of those groups finally got the ability to have the opportunity to have that promise be delivered for them. And all I'm trying to do, I won't speak for anyone else. All I'm trying to do is help America live up to its promises. And one thing you can do in this place that is a representative democracy, to use their terms, like a republic that is a constitutional republic, is at least have the democracy be representative. And it's just so very not, and so transparently not. And it's so glaring in that situation when Tom Cotton makes such a stupid, baseless argument as that, and then gets called out and everyone throws a tantrum when people just call it what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed. Well, we'll be staying on the story, seeing what happens. It passed in the House twice in 1 year, effectively. In theory, maybe the Senate would vote for it, one would think. I would caution you that if you think that everyone is just gonna look at this purely politically, that might lead you to believe, well, then wouldn't someone like Manchin want this because then the Democrats would stay in the majority? Sure, but then there'd be a buffer where he wouldn't be able to unilaterally tank every piece of legislation he wants. So I don't know, it could go either way, maybe, we'll see.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.